Well, good evening, everybody. We'll start getting ready for class here. Before we jump into things, are there any specific prayer requests that we need to keep in mind? All right, if that was all at this time, then let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and for this opportunity to come together to study your word, to have fellowship with each other. We come before you now asking that you can be with Renee as she has come home but is still weak, and that you can also be with Pat to help with her, to encourage them and strengthen them at this time. And we ask that you can be with those who are also sick or are struggling, facing some difficulty and just need you. And we ask that you can be with us throughout the rest of this evening. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, on Wednesday nights, we have been going through the book of Ecclesiastes. Before we jump into some new sections here, I'm just going to still take a couple minutes to put some things into context, remind us of a few ideas, especially since as we're getting to the end here, we might close the book out, and it'll be nice to have everything in mind, all the important ideas as we're putting it all together here. So ultimately, all of Ecclesiastes put together is really more of a sermon coming from this preacher we know to be Solomon in his wisdom. And as he is putting this together, explaining things, it's ultimately all answering this one question. In Ecclesiastes 2:3, Solomon mentions, "Until I could see what good there is for the sons of men to do under heaven the few years of their lives." And the whole book is just asking this question, trying to find an answer to this question: how should man spend his days on this earth? And repeatedly looking at the problems of the earth, the evil that persists, all the terrible things under the sun. Solomon describes it all as vanity, vanity of vanities. And he has looked into specific ideas of seeking pleasure, spending your life for labor, seeking wealth, or seeking power, even recently talking about just youth. And he says all of these are vanity. They don't last. So as he's been seeking an answer to this question, in Ecclesiastes 2:25, he said, "For who can eat and who can have enjoyment without God?" And as he has been looking at these other areas, common ways that people of the earth will seek to find a purpose for their life or what they are going to be doing to spend it, and finding that they are not the answer, he has been hinting at the true answer here. And we're going to go through a few verses again that use this phrase, to fear God. Ecclesiastes 3:14, "I know that everything God does will remain forever. There is nothing to add to it, and there is nothing to take from it, for God has so worked that men should fear him." And in 5:7, "For in many dreams and in many words there is emptiness. Rather, fear God." And in 7:18, "It is good that you grasp one thing and also not let go of the other, for the one who fears God comes forth with both of them." And in 8:12, "Although a sinner does evil 100 times and may lengthen his life, still I know that it will be well for those who fear God, who fear him openly. But it will not be well for the evil man, and he will not lengthen his days like a shadow, because he does not fear God." As the preacher has been dropping this idea of fearing God in the text, building up to the answer. Last week, we looked at chapter 11. And chapter 11 started to bring us to the conclusion. It was looking at key things to living a successful life, as to how to have a good life. And we looked at the idea of sharing, of being generous with those around us, of staying busy with our work, keeping ourselves occupied, appreciating the beauty that is around us, that God has made for us. Ultimately, it was all necessary to be keeping eternity in mind. I'm going to read Ecclesiastes 11, 9 and 10 again. Rejoice, young man, during your childhood, and let your heart be pleasant during the days of young manhood. Follow the impulses of your heart and the desires of your eyes, yet know that God will bring you to judgment for all these things. So remove grief and anger from your heart and put away pain from the body, because childhood and the prime of life are fleeting. And we saw that, yes, it is important to be generous, and this will help you to be living a good life. And it's important to keep yourself occupied, to be busy with some work that is ultimately effective, and to obviously appreciate the beauty that exists in this world and exists around us. But it's necessary to remember God. We can enjoy ourselves, but God must be a part of it, because we know he is going to bring to judgment our actions. So that's why we don't live for all these vain things. That is why we live for good things with a purpose, knowing that we have this God and we have an eternity to look forward to. So yes, there are dark days, there are hard times on this earth, all this vanity under the sun, but we're not grieved and sorrowed by everything that we have here. No, we are happy because we know we have our home somewhere else, that we're going to go to our eternal home with our God and our Creator. So as Solomon has built this up, tonight we're going to be looking at chapter 12 here, this final chapter, as he's really digging into this idea, really going to answer the question and bring a conclusion to this. Ecclesiastes 12 begins, remember also your Creator in the days of your youth. Before evil days come, draw near, will say, I have made it. Now, this verse is kind of tying in with the two previous ones, again talking about youth, again talking about God, but it also refers to God, our Creator, here. See, all these things that we have, all these things we enjoy, it's all thanks to Him, to our Creator. And especially speaking to the youth, where it can be easy to get lost in the vain things of the world, he is speaking and saying, when you are in these youth times and you want to get lost in these pleasures and labors and seeking wealth and power and whatever distract you, remember your Creator. Remember the one who gave you all of this, and still keep that eternity in mind and remain focused on Him. And as he transitions from youth, in my version, it says, before the evils come and the years draw near when you will say, I have no delight in them. And the following verses, it's pretty much unanimously to a poetic description of old age, of no longer being in this youthful time. And as you have escaped from your youth, it's the things that were easier when you were young, not so easy anymore. That are more fun and more delightful in your youth are not the same anymore. As he describes this in verses 2 through 5 here, Before the sun and the light, the moon and the stars are darkened, and clouds return after the rain. In the day the watchmen of the house tremble, and mighty men stoop. The grinding ones stand idle because they are few, and those who look through windows grow dim. And the doors on the street are shut, as the sound of the grinding mill is low. And one will arise at the sound of the bird, and all the daughters of song will sing softly. Furthermore, men are afraid of a high place and of terrors on the road. The almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags himself along, and the caperberry is ineffective. For man goes to his eternal home, while mourners go about in the street. Now, Solomon speaking here, he's putting in very poetic terms, quite the imagery here, talking about getting into his older age. Now, in verse 1 talked about getting from your youth into the older age, and verse 2 is saying, before the sun and the light, the moon and the stars are darkened, and clouds return after the rain. So it's when you have gotten older, but there's still a little bit of light left. There's still a little bit of life left, but it's still nearing the end here. And verse 3 begins a list of different consequences, I'll say, that come with getting older, just naturally as they happen. In the day that the watchmen of the house tremble, or some versions I believe say keepers of the house tremble. And this is the idea as you get older, your arms and your legs, what take care of your body, they are shaking. They get a little weaker. They tremble. They're not as steady as they used to be. It says, my version says, mighty men stoop. Other versions say the strong men bow down. And again, we recognize this with age. It happens, I mean, our legs, they can't hold us all the way up anymore. Our backs bend over a little bit. We're not as tall as we used to be. We're just a little hunched over. Even the strongest of people, the mightiest of men, as they get into their old age, they're not going to be able to support themselves in the same way they could when they were younger. It says, the grinding ones stand idle because they are few. This is talking about our teeth, the tools we use to grind, to chew down on things as we get older, and they've been used for decades and decades, fighting through all the things that we've eaten. They're weak, they're softer, there's less of them even. And it's harder to chew through things, it's harder to eat all the same stuff that we used to be able to. And it says, those who look through windows grow dim. Our eyesight begins to go. It's harder to see. And that didn't even just have to be something in old age. I'm already seeing my eyesight start to go. I'm going to need to be getting glasses. And still, we use glasses. I know much of us in the audience are wearing glasses now, and we use these glasses to help us with our eyesight so that it does go dim as quick as it could. But there's not really anything we can do to reverse this. Just as we get older, we're going to lose some capabilities, our eyesight being part of it. Then next it says, and the door and the street are shut as the sound of the grinding mill is low. Our hearing also wanes. It loses its ability. This is just natural as we get older, as age takes its toll on our physical body. We're losing our senses, or at least to the capabilities that they used to be able to function. And one will arise at the sound of the bird. Now this is a little interesting coming right after the loss of hearing, but it's easier to wake. It's hard to just stay asleep and be undisturbed. I mean, even just a little noise, a little disturbance could waken us. I personally am a very heavy sleeper. Just last night, my mom was complaining about how there were a lot of helicopters flying around before in the nights, and I didn't hear them at all. I was undisturbed, just sleeping soundly away. But it's harder to just sleep so soundly and so peacefully the older we get, and we have more sensitivity to our environment around us. The small disturbance will wake us in one way. I guess I gotta start doing things now because I'm already all the daughter song will sing will be low. And this is the idea, again, tying in with the hearing, as the previous ones have talked about, is with the way hearing gets adjusted, things will sound differently. It's going to feel the way our ears and our bodies have changed. The music and the songs and the singing that we enjoyed, it's going to sound a little different. Or even just the new things that we were hearing, we're going to say this isn't like how the songs and the singing used to be. And I'm not appreciating this modern music as the youth today do now. And I prefer the songs and the singing from my time. And verse 5 begins, furthermore, they're afraid of a high place and of terrors on the road. I don't know that necessarily with old age, we just naturally become more fearful of things and we become afraid of heights or things on the road. But it is true that as we're older, we're more vulnerable and we do need to be more careful with ourselves. I know myself as a kid, and as I see kids, they want to climb up things, and I mean really high in trees, like I know a couple times I've climbed a tree high enough to where it'll start bending at the top because it wasn't supposed to support that much weight at the very tip of the top of the tree. And I mean that's more of a reckless thing than a not fearful way. But as we get older, we're not able to be so careless with our actions there. We're going to think, well, if I were up at the top of this tree, that's going to be a lot of danger. If I fall, I'm going to break more than a hip there. But we do become more vulnerable. We need to end up being more careful, and that might show itself in a way of being fearful of these things. Next, it says the almond tree blossoms. And what it's talking about here is our hair going gray, going white. As we get older, just to happen that way. If we had any kind of color of hair, the older we get, it's going to become this white. That's just what happens with age here. And the grasshopper drags himself along. And grasshoppers, they're pretty impressive in their jumping abilities, in how quickly they can move around, how far they can go. Even the most lively, most active people are going to get to a point, if they've lived to an old enough age, where they can't be jumping around. They can't be as active as they used to. They need to slow things down. A couple of years ago, Arnold Schwarzenegger said that he was done working out. 7-time Mr. Olympia I mean, and still an icon of exercise and fitness, but he's too old. He has to stop. Even a grasshopper will end up dragging itself along. And as we get older, we lose this energy, that same energy that we had when we were young. It runs out eventually. And the capperberry is ineffective, or desire fails. There's not much said about the word that is translated by my version as capperberry. The understanding of context of this berry, the berry was used to bring on an appetite to be able to eat, or it was used to bring on in an appetite for another desire. As we get older, that specific desire does not remain in our body the same way it was when we were. It closes in verse 5. It says, "For man goes to his eternal home, while mourners go about in the street." And after all this talk and all this poetry of just how great it is to get older, I say that sarcastically. Solomon hasn't painted old age in the best light with his words, few verses. Then it's more of an encouraging thing for this person who has been losing their sight, losing their hearing, losing the capability that they were able to do with their physical body that they now can no longer do. They go on to their eternal home, freed from this aged body, from the evil days, the years where they say, "I have no delight in them," freed from living under the sun, around all the vanity. They go to their eternal home. Keeping eternity in mind in this life is the only way to get through it. And when we reach the end of this life, we go home. And it's very interesting that Solomon said, as when we go to our eternal home, the New Testament doesn't have very much mention of the afterlife. But the wisest man, in his thinking, in his time, was able to figure out that this isn't it. In all my search, earth, under the sun, all I found here was vanity. Things do not last. And as I find that the true answer as how I'm to spend my days with God, I see that leaving this earth can only bring me to eternity. And coming to be with God, that can only be my home. So yes, there are mourners going about in the street, miss this person that has passed on. They have reached peace. They made it. In enough time, we're going to join them. Solomon has put this together again, talking about keep God in mind as we were young, and even as we get into our old age, again, bringing it back around to God and to eternity. Remember him for the cord is broken, and the golden bowl crushed, the pitcher by well is shattered, and the wheel at the cistern is crushed. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. All is vanity. Solomon again things in perspective, looking at the life on that we're going to go to God, that we're going to go to this eternity. Remember him, God in mind, your creator. Keep him as a central part of your life. And if you haven't been that, well, make sure that you take care of that before this life is over. Before the silver cord is broken, it's loosed. Before the golden bowl crushed. The pitcher by the well being shattered, the wheel cistern crushed. Before your life, remember God, recognize the Creator, that His place in your existence. And do this before it's too late. Because when the silver cord is broken, when this pitcher is shattered, then the dust will return to the earth as it was. Adam, the first man, was created from dust. His body taken from the physical things of this earth. And as we die, that physical body is just going to return back to the earth. The physical staying physical. But the spirit return to the who gave it. Our Creator, our God who gave us this life, who put this spirit in us, that spirit is going to return to him. That spirit is going to come to him in judgment. So make sure that you have remembered him, that you have kept this eternity in mind through your life, knowing that God will bring you to judgment for these things. Before it's too late, before this life is over, remember your Creator, remember your God. And in 12:8 here, it says, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity. In Ecclesiastes 1, verse 2, Solomon said, in the very beginning of this sermon, he said, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And here at the end, he says, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. I like to repeat things. Daryl repeats things. Many preachers repeat things in their sermon. But usually, some things we repeat in the very beginning, at least speaking from my Bible, I will start with something to get people's attention, to get them focused, get them thinking. And I'll repeat it again. And then I bring real truth. Like people's attention really focus what is about to be said. And someone here at the beginning thing said, at the very end that I said, and it's. But it wasn't in word to really emphasize the importance he is. Put head arrows and rocks on is here. Say this is the important part. Starting in verse 9, in addition to being a wise man, through these closing verses here, pointed out that Solomon, being this wise man that he is and having the knowledge that he did, being this preacher, that he did a few things for the people. It says that he taught them knowledge. He arranged proverbs for them so that they could understand this wisdom. He sought to find delightful words, encouraging things to say to action. This knowledge, this wisdom, having this information, this truth, it pushes people to action. Like well-driven nails. That we're the nail, and this message, this truth, this wisdom, this knowledge, that is what drives us. I think if you think of this imagery in the context of the whole book, how everyone out there is this nail. And we're trying to find our way to get knocked into the wood. We can look anywhere we want, but really the only way that nail is going to get driven into the wood is by the hammer that was designed to do so. So as Solomon has put together this knowledge and this wisdom for people, this truth for people to understand here, but all these things under the sun, this is vanity. Truly, the only thing you can do is to fear God and keep his commandments. Now, he has said before in this book to fear God. He has said to remember our Creator, to keep our God in mind, to be looking to this eternity. But here in the conclusion, he says to fear God and keep his commandments. Because these words that have this knowledge, this wisdom, this truth to them, they push people to action. And that action shouldn't just be the same things we were doing. We're not pushed to action to say, okay, yeah, there is a God, so now I'm going to spend my life trying to get as rich as possible. Yeah, there is a God, so I'm going to spend my life just seeking power, just pursuing all of my pleasures, all of my desires. We say, there is a God. I'm going to spend my life following him, keeping his commandments, doing what he wants me to do. My version translates, because this applies to every person. Some say this is man's all, or this is the whole of man. This sermon was trying to answer a question. What is man to do to spend his few years on this earth? And the answer to that question, the answer that applies to everyone out there, is to fear God and keep his commandments. To take these words of knowledge, of wisdom, of truth, and have them push you to action. Because we know God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. Because we know that at the end of this life, we're going to face this judgment. We are going to have to explain to God why we did what we did. We need to make sure that what we did was what he wanted us to do. That we were doing things pleasing to him, that we were keeping his commandments, fearing him, following after him. That is the answer. As 11 began this conclusion, we can share, we can be generous with people, and we keep ourselves busy with the effective work that we're doing. We appreciate the beauty that is around us, but we have this eternity in mind. We have our Creator, our God, in mind with all of our decisions, with all of our actions, because we know at the end of this life, we're going to answer for those. And at the end of this life, when we face that judgment, we want to go on to our eternal home. We want to go where we belong, to be with God. And when we think of this life as just this life and our home of being with God, that's our home, that's our future to look forward to. But now this life, the things under the sun, now it just seems worth it. Fearing God, keeping his commandments, we can do that. That is our purpose in life. That is how we are to spend our few years on this earth. That was our bell. Does anybody have any questions about what we have covered tonight? Okay. Well, if you think of some later, feel free to come talk to me, and we will take some time to get ready for our devotional period.
Good evening, everyone. It's Steve. Good to be here to worship our Lord tonight together. Family of God. First hymn tonight, we number 499. 499. Ask Brother Brother to lead us in prayer. Oh, like thee, blessed Redeemer, this is my constant longing. Let me not forget all this treasure, Jesus, my word. Oh, to be like thee. Oh, to be like thee, blessed Redeemer, here I am. Come in thy sweetness, come in thy fullness, and thy glory be my heart. Oh, to be like thee, full of compassion, loving, forgiving, tender and kind, helping the helpless, cheering the fainting, seeking the wandering, sanctify. Oh, to be like thee, oh, to be like thee, blessed Redeemer, here as thou art. Come in thy sweetness, come in thy fullness, and thine own spirit. Be on thy heart. Oh, to be like thee, holy in spirit, holy and heartless, patient and brave, meekly glory, glory, protest, willing to suffer, others to save. Oh, to be like thee, oh, to be like thee, blessed Redeemer, good as thou art. Come in thy sweetness, come in thy fullness, and thine own spirit, deep on thy heart. Oh, to be like thee, Lord, I am calling, now to receive anointing divine. Oh, to be like thee. Oh, to be like thee. Blessed Redeemer, good as thou art. Come in thy sweet, come in thy fullness, and final deep on my heart. Invitation hymn will be number 61. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful day you've given us. Time that's been set aside for us to gather together, our brothers and sisters, to message for prayers, fellowship with our brothers. Yes, we be service this evening. You men lead, help them as they choose the words, be articulate. Always, yes, for forgiveness. People that are sick, struggling, those always. I needed to bear something to me that maybe was a little new to me. But I think is be laid out in front of me and get a less picture of what it is supposed to do. And once, like, and it really is simple. The Bible thinks about there's us here. Much of it pertains to things that we're supposed to use to try to accomplish in our lives, if we will. In Timothy 2, verse 15, very familiar. It says, diligent, yourselves, prove to God a word is not to shame. Some versions say, interestingly,